You've probably sat here, someone spent days pulling numbers, the dashboard is perfectly presented, and then the final choice gets made on gut instinct anyway. Across Fortune 1000 companies, 94% of organizations are actively increasing their investments in data infrastructure, yet only about 24% of those executives say their companies are actually data-driven. There is an uncomfortable truth that the industry rarely discusses. A pristine data pipeline doesn't automatically produce better choices. You can buy the modern stack, hire incredibly sharp analysts, and still completely ignore the numbers. The gap between hoarding information and executing a business action is an architectural failure. The data is flowing perfectly fine. The decisions just aren't physically connected to it. Logistics companies talk constantly about the last mile problem, the difficult process of getting a package from a facility to someone's front door.
But analytics has a last mile problem too, getting an insight off a dashboard and translating it into a concrete decision. Look at this typical data journey. Events hit the raw warehouse, run through transformation models, and end up on a presentation dashboard. But after vague action items are assigned, nothing changes. Right here, the chain breaks. Building a flawless, zero-latency pipeline is a massive waste of resources if your company's actual decision-making infrastructure isn't explicitly tied into it. To understand why data dies in the boardroom, we can work backward through the pipeline and identify 3 specific roadblocks. This animation shows metric theater in practice. Organizations track hundreds of vanity metrics because they look good, but absolutely none are tied to a specific business trigger. They track everything and decide on nothing. The second roadblock is a massive latency mismatch. Engineering teams spend millions optimizing streaming architectures to deliver data in 2 hours. But if the corporate committee takes 3 weeks to review that data and make a choice, the speed of the pipeline is irrelevant. The final roadblock is the trust gap. Analysts often don't trust executives to use data responsibly, so they bury their findings in caveats. In response, executives assume they aren't getting the full story and override the reports with their own experience. These 3 symptoms point to the same underlying truth. Buying more dashboards and pushing for faster data streams will never cure a broken decision pipeline. To see exactly how deep this mismatch goes, you have to look at the SQL data models driving the modern stack. Look at this standard code block, built strictly to report. It counts users and sums revenue to answer what happened last week. But by serving marketing, product, and sales simultaneously, the metrics water down into a summary that produces 0 action items. Organizations spend vast amounts of capital building technical infrastructure designed exclusively to summarize the past. That creates an immediate architectural mismatch for a company trying to decide its future. Fixing this requires abandoning vague calls for better data culture. Instead, companies have to structurally rebuild their pipelines backward, starting entirely with the specific decision they need to make. The primary rule of a decision-first framework is ruthless. If you cannot explicitly name the decision a metric is meant to support, that metric does not get built. Compare the previous model with this built-to-decide query. It abandons general averages and asks a hyper-specific question: which accounts are at risk? It uses hard math triggers based on contract dates and session drops. The outpoint isn't a vague aggregate. The business decision is embedded directly into the code, which completely removes the need for human interpretation at the dashboard level. By letting the destination, the executed decision, dictate the exact structure of the data query, that final gap between insight and action is closed. This setup only functions if decision ownership is assigned at the metric level. It's not enough for the analytics team to monitor the list. A specific person must be assigned to the trigger, making the action mandatory the moment a threshold is crossed. Here is the final piece of a functional stack: an interface for logging business decisions the exact same way software engineers log code deployments. Timestamping these actions and attributing them to specific data inputs creates a permanent institutional memory. 3 months down the line, a team can trace an outcome directly back to the data that informed it and actually learn what works. A beautiful dashboard will not make a choice for you. True data-driven organizations understand that to get value out of their information, the infrastructure itself must be